Hello, I'm Colleen Gallagher, CEO at Onward and Upward, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Association Insights podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Henning, and today's episode is the second installment in our AI series. I'm joined today by Preeti Vasishtha. I hope I got that right.
It's perfect.
Preeti is a senior communications executive with over 20 years of experience at various organizations in the Washington, D.C. area. She began her career as a writer for the Washington Post Newsweek magazine after earning a master's degree in journalism from American University. She also served as director of communications at the American Sociological Association, where she directed the organization's marketing and communications strategies. She then went on to serve as editor-in-chief at the National Association of Corporate Directors and the National Association of College and University Business Officers, where she led storytelling teams in creating and producing digital and print magazines, newsletters, online articles, and podcasts. Currently, she is the Director of Content and Editor-in-Chief at the American Academy of Actuaries. Welcome, Preeti.
Thank you so much, Meghan, for that wonderful introduction. And it's an absolute honor to be on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Great. So before we dive into AI, tell us a little bit about the American Academy of Actuaries and your role there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Academy, we've been around for 60 years, and it's a nonpartisan organization that serves both the public and the actuarial profession. So our mission really is about making sure that actuaries are equipped with the professional standards and education they need in areas such as pensions, insurance, financial reporting, and risk management. So it's basically all making sure that our insurance policy is priced fairly, our retirement plan is secure, and just businesses are prepared for the unexpected. That's the areas of expertise in those areas. As for me, I'm the Director of Content and Editor-in-Chief of Contingencies. It's the Academy's bi-monthly publication magazine. I oversee the entire content creation process. I'm also responsible for setting the editorial vision for the magazine. It's an absolutely great role, and I'm really enjoying it. I get to work with some really smart people across the areas that I just mentioned, and I'm happily shaping how we communicate key issues to our members. And today I'm speaking with you, Meghan, as a communications professional who's both been studying and working with AI in practice.
So what ignited your passion for AI?
Yeah, I had to really think hard about this, and I went all the way back to 2011. You might remember that IBM Watson had won Jeopardy that year, and it was absolutely all over the news. I think front headlines all over, right? And several things happened around that time, actually. So Apple launched Siri with 4S. Yeah, going back to 4S. And at that time, man, a built-in voice assistant, you're like, wow, that is so cool. It felt really cool at that time. And about, I think, 2014, Amazon started coming into the picture. They launched Alexa with the Echo. And I remember me and my husband visited a friend of ours, and that person had just started using Alexa. And it was so cool because we were having fun with it. It told you the weather, cracked a joke, and when you whispered a question, it would whisper an answer back to you. It was just fun, right? We were just fun, playing around, mind-blowing that this technology was really in our hands now. It's not sitting in some research lab with very science-type people. So it's in our hands, in our lives now. So these developments had started making me curious about the technology. And what I find really interesting is that all of this was AI back then, but it really wasn't being marketed as AI. They were just being called like smart assistants that probably because companies felt AI was very sci-fi at that time, and companies were more focused on the benefits of the technology rather than the intelligence. Anyway, all of this was happening at that time, and I was working as an editor for a magazine in higher education. And for one of our special issues, we invited a futurist to write a piece on what could it look like in 2025? What would the world look like in higher ed? And he wrote a brilliant article, and he came up with 4 different scenarios. One of them was entirely focused on AI, right? He predicted, among other things, that we'd see employers, people like you and me, working like cyborgs almost, integrated with assistive AI to do our jobs. That idea really stuck with me, and I was like, wow, this, it felt very bold, a little out there at that time, even far-fetched, but it made an impact. And look, here we are in 2025 and we are living it. This is our world now. So that planted a seed for me. And it's partly why I've stayed so curious about technology, where this technology is going, how it's not just impacting our work, but even our personal lives, right? And with such rapid progress, advancements, it's almost breathtaking, hard to keep up in this area. I like to think about how that's impacting my work and the companies where I work at. I try and stay on top of things as much as possible. I reach out to association peers. I'm attending webinars, conferences. I take relevant courses as much as possible. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this space.
You're so right. And I hadn't even thought that, the echo and, that I wasn't even thinking of that as AI until you just said that. I thought, oh, why wasn't I thinking of that? But I think you're right that people didn't want to market that. And maybe it was because it was too out there or it was frightening. I have a 13-year-old daughter who saw me using it and was like, oh, you're not supposed to use that. Because of course they're not supposed to use that in school. So it's an interesting situation to be in because everyone is talking about it. Everyone is using it. But I love what ignited your passion for this, because I think it's so great that you had that article that talked about 2020 or 2025. So that's very cool. I know that you have said, and I love this, that AI is like an intern, but also a powerful partner. How has that metaphor played out in your day-to-day work?
Yeah. I think for the purposes of this podcast, Meghan, I'd just like to clarify that when we are talking of AI, we are really mainly talking about Gen AI here, right?
Yeah.
Because it's basically AI that we use to create new content based on whatever AI has learned on, right? On the previous examples. So yeah, I do like to say that AI is it's just like having an intern and also a powerful partner. It's just depending on how you use it. When I think of an intern, a capable intern, what do I want that person to do? So I would use their help for some background research. I would use their help for organizing data, drafting memos, and even putting together a quick presentation. A capable intern does that, but so does AI, right? Gen AI does that, and it does it so fast, so quick. But just like I would with an intern, I would coach and mentor them. I would do the same with Gen AI, right? I have to give it absolutely clear instructions and context. I'll have to have a really well-defined task for them to work on. And I'd absolutely have to review the output before it's ready for prime time. So that's where I feel like Gen AI is like having an intern with you all the time. Where I find AI to be a really powerful and a helpful partner is when it lets me it helps me work smarter. So what do I mean by that? You've probably attended conferences like I have, taken notes and copious notes, and you come back and I can't even understand my handwriting when I start to sift through all of that information. I don't know, but it would take me days over several weeks to actually get the important stuff out of my scribbly notes. And then I had to sit with it, make a clean summary, and then share it and present it to my teams. But now, if you just feed that stuff into AI, you get that clean summary so quick, so fast, all the key themes, and then you can make a quick presentation or just share it with your team, right? So it's such a time saver. So I now have the time to actually focus on strategy side of things, on the analysis side of things versus the tedious job of sifting through that. Another way that I have found it to be really powerful is when you have to scan reports, right? Some of them are as long as 100 pages long, and you're sitting with a report and you may even want to compare it to a previous version. So AI tools are great at that. You scan both the reports, they can tell you what the changes are. They'll even summarize for you the shifts in tones or emphasis. So I find that really helpful, very powerful. And I would want to point out that these tools are not really replacing the thinking part of things that you do, I think, but they just help me get to the thinking faster. It's just making the background stuff go away so that I can get to what I really want to do really quick and fast. So I find that absolutely very helpful.
I would agree. And I loved the comparison of a good like intern, because you're right. You would give a project to an intern, but you wouldn't just allow it to go unchecked or to not take a look at it or move it up the food chain. That would never happen. And I do think that keeping that in mind for people who get afraid to use it is so helpful, because you're not just going to take, I don't think there's ever been a time that I have used AI and just thought, that's it. Like, it doesn't need any enhancement or it doesn't need anything. So I literally love that. And I feel like that's it's powerful advice for people who might be afraid at this point to use it. So in your current role, you've had to ramp up highly technical content fast, as you just mentioned. How has AI helped you accelerate your learning and content planning in a new industry?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, whenever you step into a new industry, which is highly technical content, which has been my case of pretty much all my career, it comes with a really steep learning curve. And in this job, particularly with the AI tools that are available, I've been able to use it as a learning companion of sorts. Overall, it just helps me get more comfortable, oriented quickly with the complex topics. Like, for example, we were short on time and I was planning a magazine article on insurance technology, which really called InsurTech within the insurance world. And the way I used AI was I used it to find the latest trends. I knew the sources where I wanted it to look for trends. I just didn't have the time to go and access those websites on my own. So I could prompt it to do that. It really helped me identify what was overall happening in that space. I asked for recent adoption data, again from credible sources being key. And that really helped me understand the broader landscape. So what I did was, with all this information that I gathered, I then sat down with the subject matter expert and said, hey, this is what's coming up in my research or what I'm seeing. Is this what you are seeing as well? And is this the way we want to frame our article? So overall, it really helped me frame the article effectively, very quickly. And again, I'd like to point out, it's not about replacing the research, but it just accelerates the process. So what I can do then with that time that I didn't have previously, I can connect the dots and I can craft the narrative, which I still did, but now I'm doing it more efficiently because I have this extra time.
Yes, I love that. And I know you mentioned in the very beginning that you've also completed several AI related courses and have recently completed a certificate program. First, can you tell us about that? And then what's one insight or concept that's really shifted how you approach AI because of those courses?
So the certificate program that I just completed is from University of Maryland. It's from the business school, Robert E. Smith Business School. Yeah. So they have a program that's out there. It's a 10 module part, and it's about AI and your career transformation. So it really gives you an overall view of what's happening in all the industries, whether it's finance, whether it's law firms. It gives you that whole big picture, brings it together. But because what we read in the news is chat GPT in schools, or maybe chat GPT doing writing computer programs. So what you get is like really different parts of AI, Gen AI, but this sort of program brings it all holistically, brings it all together. And there are certain industries which are certainly ramping it. They're really going fast because they're just ripe for it. But association world, which we can discuss later, is a little slower to adopt. So that was a really powerful program, really bringing it all together. And yeah, having said that, done several courses and this program, I think one thing that I try and remember really is that Gen AI is very powerful. It's very helpful. It gives you answers. It's very chatty. You feel like it really knows its stuff, and you feel, oh, wow, this thing is really cool and really smart. It all comes back to when it is very helpful, but it only knows the data that it's been trained on. And that's something that I have to remember every time I work with it. It doesn't have any lived experience. It doesn't have any values. It has no understanding of nuances unless I provided that context. So I am very intentional about how I frame the prompt, what I'm asking it to do, and how I even evaluate the response, most importantly. To give you a more specific example, let's say I'm researching for a piece on climate risk, right? Climate events, climate change. I won't just prompt AI to give me current research about climate change, right? I'm going to be very intentional in framing the prompt. So, for instance, I might ask it to analyze trends in climate related incidents. I could specify the incidents. These could be wildfires, it could be floods, it could be hurricanes. I would then further prompt it to use data from the last 10 to 15 years, right? So I'm giving it very specific value, so to speak of. And I'll also prompt it to show patterns in economic losses and maybe in insurance claims over that 10 to 15 period. And I would also make sure that it's using credible sources that I could fact check, right? So this kind of prompt is giving me a response as a starting point. So it's very specific. I've told what I wanted to do, their values, there's context, everything. So it gives me a structure to work with. But again, I'll say all the critical thinking, all the judgment, the storytelling as a content professional, that's still on me. This is just a starting point. So while Gen AI feels very chatty and intelligent almost in your interactions, you have to remember it is what it is based on what it's trained on.
And I like your point about the prompt. So when this became popular, like a year ago or something, Colleen jumped right into it, right? She absolutely loved it. She was planning vacations with it, and I was terrified of it. I thought, oh my gosh, is this like cheating? I don't know what to ask it. I feel like I would ask the wrong prompt, and then I would get something that I would think, this isn't what I was thinking. And I think you're right with the prompt that, again, that part is your vision. What am I looking for? And what am I going for? And of course, as communications professionals, we know what we're hoping the end result will be. So the prompt, while it took me some time to get used to how to give it a very good prompt so that I could get what I was hoping for and be able to work with that. So I think that's very important. And I definitely think that if there are people who, I don't know, feel hesitant still about using it, it is the prompt. And Colleen's suggestion to me was almost talk to it. If you were going to ask somebody to do some research for you, you would end up being very clear with, I want it with wildfires or floods and all of that. You would say that. So say it to it. And I do think that is such a key piece of information for our listeners who might be still on the fence. So I love that.
Yeah.
You mentioned a growing ability to spot AI generated content immediately, and I love this. So what advice would you give to association teams trying to maintain authenticity while using this tool? Because I have seen certain emails and I think, oh, goodness, this was so just AI generated. There's no them in the email. So tell us about that.
Yeah, this is a controversial comment I made, and I'll tell you why. Because there is this massive debate on LinkedIn on people saying it's the best thing. I don't pass any judgment on me because I use AI to write content. And then there's the other side, which is like, almost looking down on people who use that. Having said that, I will say, first off, absolutely no judgment from my end on anyone who uses AI to write content. I really, in all sincerity, I think for a lot of people, it can be a really useful tool, especially if writing isn't your strong point, right? Or it's just hard for you to communicate your ideas clearly. That's an area of struggle. So look, everyone's got their own processes. And if AI is making you help your message get across more effectively, great. But having said all that, and going back to what you said, Megan, about the email and have you just know, I personally find that AI generated content, it has a certain tone, almost a structure that just gives it away. So what do I mean by that? I find the content feels overly polished. Sometimes it's way too generic. And it's almost like it's trying so hard to be impressive. And then there was a recent study that came my way from the Planck Institute. They have so many institutes, so I'll mention the right one. It's the Max Planck Institute for Human Development. And they found that since ChatGPT launched, words like adept or what was that, delve, or even meticulous, their usage has gone up by 50%. That's quite a lot, right? So you begin to see these patterns very quickly in content. So as a content professional, I have always believed that your first draft is really the most important draft. Not because it's perfect, it's actually far from being perfect. But that's where I feel it's your ideas draft. I think that's where the real thinking happens. That's where you decide, you figure out what is it that I want to say and what's worth saying, right? And the way you choose your words, the way you structure your sentences, that's your voice. You're making a conscious decision to say something in a certain way, and that's what makes your writing yours. Gen AI is great at producing something quickly, but like I said, it just lacks the personality. I find that writing doesn't necessarily stick with me. It doesn't have that emotional appeal as such. It's technically absolutely great. There's no wrong with it technically, but that emotional pull, it's missing that. So, what my advice to communications teams is just hold on to your voice. Let your writing reflect your thinking and your style. You just start with that messy first draft. Choose your words. That's what makes your content authentic. That's what makes, I think, resonates with your audience. AI tools are great, and I find them great as editing assistants. But even then, you need to really guide them, right, with the right prompts. You are still the writer. Hold on to your voice. Just use the tool to refine. But my thing is that voice, that authenticity, that has to come through your content. And I just hold on to that.
I love that. And I'm laughing at the word delve because it's so true. Because how many people are saying that in their actual vocabulary? And I
Right?
think that is something that has to be said. You think, are these words even something I would say to somebody if they were in front of me? And I get that certain writing becomes different, right? Where you are going to have a more formal voice. But in so many things that I think that associations are doing where you're talking to members, make sure that it's you talking to the member, that you sound like you and not some, I don't know. I love it's trying to impress you. That's so true with some of the vocabulary words that it chooses. And it's obviously it's not incorrect, but there's so many different times that I think, gosh, I don't think I've ever used this word like in a sentence. So I really like that. I think that's great. I know you mentioned the debate on LinkedIn, but what are you hearing and seeing when it comes to how associations are approaching AI adoption and AI policy?
Yeah, that's a really big question and a really good question because we live in the association world. And this is not surprising at all. But adoption in associations is still in its very early stages. Last year, there's a company called Momentum Software. They did a study last fall, and it's been spoken about at ASE conferences, ASAE conferences and events. So they did a study on technology in associations, and it's a great study. According to that, they said about 18% of associations that have adopted AI. But again, like I said, this came out in last fall, so obviously the numbers have changed since then. But it still gives us an idea, right? 18%, 18, 20, 25, maybe this year, I don't know. And some sessions and association professionals that I've spoken with have said that the biggest barrier right now just seems to be association staff feeling stuck. There's just a lack of knowledge and resources. Like they don't know where to start. Even if they want to try, they're not always where to start and what tools to use. There's a lack of time, there's the budget side of things, and really they don't have that, they don't feel confident enough to really explore AI tools in a meaningful way. On top of that, there's all this uncertainty about, and rightly, around legal issues, data privacy, intellectual property. You want to know what are the rules and where are the guardrails, right? The same study also said that there are about 1/3 of boards that currently support using AI within the association world. So there's obviously there's a need for leadership buy-in. We need clarity from the top, right? Organizations need that. But having said that, there are associations that are using AI pretty effectively, both for internal efficiencies, and they are also providing value to their members. So when it comes to, we talked about this earlier, when it comes to internal efficiencies, it's really the content space. That's the low-hanging fruit right there, right? Things like newsletters, social media, email campaigns, social media posts, those are easy to work with when it comes to AI. And I think on the member front, what I have seen is associations have launched their own versions of ChatGPT. So members can query them, right, on their own content and find answers. Another use case that is happening right now, I think it's taking more prevalence now, is conference presenters. They are finding best home sessions for their abstracts. So there are associations that get as many as 800, 900 abstracts. And as a presenter, sometimes I'm confused. I'm like, where do I slot my abstract? Does it go under this category or that category? It's huge. It's a huge task. The annual meeting committee members used to always talk about this. How do we streamline this process? And now they're able, so AI basically, as a presenter, if I'm presenting, I just plug in my abstract and the AI comes in and helps me with a bunch of matches where I can choose, oh, out of these 20, I think this is where my materials fits in well. So that's a good use case, I think. But I think what's really important is, this is on the association side, but I think what we have to remember is members like you and me, we are already ahead in some ways. Why? Because we're already using AI daily in our lives almost, right? So the same study that I was talking about, it found out that about 50% of members use AI every week. On the other hand, we have associations, just about 18, 20% doing the same. That's a huge gap. And we know that Gen Z and millennials, these are the future of our membership, right? They are the power users. About 60% of them use AI weekly. These are all interesting numbers, but what's the story? Why do these numbers matter, right? It's that same study that found out that members who see their association, professional associations, as early tech adopters are more satisfied, they're more likely to stay engaged, and they will recommend it to others. So adopting AI is not really just about keeping up with technology. Of course, that's there. But I think if you look longer term, it's about building member loyalty and engagement.
That is a great point. And I don't know of many people who have made that, because you think of, I have known of places where people say, our AI policy is for you not to use it. And my immediate reaction is, oh no, that's a terrible idea, right? Because to outlaw something that is clearly moving forward means that you might be left behind, which you don't want to have happen. But I love the thought that is going to bring like the loyalty, which is what is needed, right? Because you have these younger people. And I know that certainly on this podcast, we have talked about how do you engage this younger generation and make it so that they're aware of the benefits of being part of an association, because they're very different from us. And I think that's a really good point. I really love that.
And Megan, if I could add something to that, keeping aside the study, look at people like you and me, right? We are using AI or starting to use AI more and more in our daily lives. And then we see other companies use it, maybe your bank's using it, maybe something. At some point, you're going to wonder, why is my professional association not able to provide these services as quickly and as effectively as another company that I'm just giving me all this information that I need, right? So I get that associations need to do it thoughtfully, but not to the point where you're so far behind that your members begin to question, like, why aren't we seeing you in this, adopting this, and for me to be able to use it?
That is some great advice. I love that. So as someone who's both a practitioner and a student of AI, where do you see the biggest opportunities and challenges ahead for associations trying to integrate it thoughtfully?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And, having been in the association world, the one thing that's always stayed with me is we are sitting on this gold mine of some great content, right? That's all geared towards members. Research, we have issue briefs, white papers, journals, magazine articles, you name it, we have it, right? There's this massive knowledge sort of library database that's been built over years. And some of these associations have been around for 50, 60, 70, hundreds of years. So now I think with AI, we have this huge opportunity for associations to use content in ways that was probably too hard before. They didn't have the resources, or it just took a lot of time. So what do I mean by that? So I think there are AI tools that can help you organize and sift through this content, right? And you can meet members where they are. So what do I mean by that? You present the most relevant information to each member, depending on maybe their area of interest, their career stages, or even the challenges they're facing. And I wouldn't be surprised if members find content that they didn't even know existed, that their associations had. So that kind of personalization, I would think, if I'm a member, I would love that from my association. It would really boost engagement. And let's take this even a step further. So if I'm a member, I'm querying on some area, say insurance again, and maybe then the association can have AI recommend an upcoming event that could be of interest to me and even help me register for that event. So that's just not content, but it's taking it even a step further. And the most easiest way I think most associations can use AI is to repurpose content they already have. Take a long report, make it into a shorter piece. A webinar can become a reel. You have a lot of raw data that can become a visual story. So what you're really seeing is you're getting a lot more value from what you already have, and you're meeting members where they are. Maybe you are even giving that surprise and delight factor to your members. Wow, I didn't know about this. So I really think it's about delivering value to members in a more strategic way, more member-focused way. It's just about making that content more accessible, useful, impactful. And you and I know how much work goes into each piece of content. So if that can get more life and be of more benefit to the members, I think that's absolutely great. And I'll just talk a little bit about the challenge part of it. I don't think it's so much a challenge, but I think one area where associations, for that matter, all companies need to be really mindful and focus a lot of their energies is the data governance side of things. Really, AI is only as good as the data it's built on. So it's the backbone of using AI responsibly. So you want to make sure that all the data that you're feeding into your AI systems, it's accurate, it's reliable, It follows all the relevant rules and policies. I don't think if you have that in place, you are building AI systems which could be biased, it could be misleading, even harmful, right? For example, if your training data has some historical inequities or gaps, AI is going to reproduce those patterns and at scale. So that has some real consequences. So I think good data governance is probably the most important piece in making AI effective and trustworthy.
I have loved this conversation. I told you this before we started recording, that when Colleen and I went through the questions, we both were like, I cannot wait to hear the answers to these questions. And it is true. So I feel like our listeners are in for some great advice and great recommendations. So I appreciate this. We wrap up every podcast with a few fun questions so our audience can get to know you. So I will start with, have you traveled to anywhere fun lately?
Yeah, we were in Outer Banks a couple of weeks ago. And the fun part was that we were in a quieter part of Outer Banks. So it's a really small place called Waves. It was just lovely. Quiet, lovely, being with the nature and the beach and crabs. Just wonderful.
Sounds perfect. So what podcasts are you listening to that you might recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I divide them in the personal pocket, and the professional side of things. And for the personal side, I listen to Mel Robbins a lot, even before she became bigger, from much earlier than the Let Them Move movement happened. She's been my go-to person. I think she gets it. And for the professional side of things, it's varied. Right now, I was listening to Adam Grant a lot, but now I just listen to HBR podcasts, any of them, whether it's Women at Work, they have an ideas cast, I think that's what they call it. And then Coaching Real Leaders. There's always the nugget of information that you feel you can apply to your life, sometimes even your personal life. So yeah, those are my go-tos right now.
I'll have to check those out. What's one place in the United States you've never been, but you're dying to go to?
Oh, absolutely. New England in fall. I would absolutely love to see those colors when they're peaking. I've been to New England like other seasons, but the fall part, it just seems magical.
Yes, you see those photos, I mean, they look fake.
I know. Is that AI generated?
Absolutely.
Right?
So last question, finish the sentence. When you see me looking at my phone, it probably means that I'm
responding to a text in a family chat, since my son, my 13-year-old, just got an iPhone, and it's probably a text about, what are we doing for dinner? Can we get some food from outside?
That is so true. I'm a 13-year-old, and that's pretty much on a daily basis. What's for dinner? I mean, it's literally a question I now, just roll my eyes to. Well, Preeti, I have loved this conversation. I think it's great. I really believe our listeners will take a lot away from this. So I appreciate your time and all of your insight.
Well, yeah, I had an absolute blast. And like I said, it was an honor to be interviewed for this podcast. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
That's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights Podcast, previously known as the Association 100 Podcast, is a production of Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a bi-monthly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words of wisdom from the trenches of association life? We want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupward.com. That's info@onwardupward.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association insights and inspiration. Thanks for tuning in.